I was specifically asked to talk about how on earth can more CMOs make it to the CEO position. And I tell you, I spend a lot of time at conferences, for example, with the CIO community, and they are having exactly the same discussion. How do more CIOs get to become CEOs? And there kind of, I believe, is there a sort of a winning pattern in amongst that, because what I've realized is there's some attributes and behaviors and things that I've seen where people have made the bridge, and I wondered what those things are. And so I've begun to start to note them down. So, destination CEO, what can we do to increase our propensity to get to the top and to become a CEO of a business? So the one thing I think it's worth setting the scene of is actually kind of, well, what happens in people's careers? Well, this is generally speaking what happens. You know, we start as a manager of tasks, and then we might get a few people, we become a manager of people, then we become a manager of managers, don't we? We get teams and things like that. But what I've generally seen is that what people want more than anything is that, you know, I want to be a director of the business, all right? And particularly in the creative industries, the title director is given out kind of pretty much quite easily. You know, you go into an agency, there's like 20 people in the agency and 18 people are directors. And you go, wow, you know, everyone's a director. It's brilliant. But what I tend to see is that what then happens is that becomes the state, and that state doesn't change. And what happens is that line of, you get up to that point, and the reason there are breakout lines from all of these different paths is some people just get there and stay there. So they just become a director, non-executive, which is more about a director of a function. You know, director of sales, director of creative, director of studio, whatever that might be. But what really getting to the CEO position is all about is going beyond that. And you've got to go up the next 2 steps of that ladder effectively. Now, the first step of that is when you go from being a non-executive director to an executive director. That's where you're given the statutory authority of being a legal director of the entity. And I can tell you, when I first got that, boy, oh boy, did that feel heavy. That felt heavy. Because suddenly, you bear an awful lot of legal responsibility for the organization. You know, you got a rogue salesperson price fixing, and you get a dawn raid from the OFT, then the first person that they're going to come and talk to, and the person that will bear legal responsibility for that, if you're a statutory director, is you. If someone dies in your warehouse because an accident occurred, and it's out of your control, it's your job as a statutory director to ensure health and safety is upheld at all times. So the game really begins to change. And particularly the amount of responsibility that you're going to have to bear, legal responsibility, absolutely changes. And I can remember in those first few months sort of going home every night kind of thinking, oh, bloody hell, I'm not sure I really wanted all of this. It's really heavy. And I didn't realize I've got all of these consequences that I'm suddenly now responsible for. And that in itself begins to change the way you think. Because you suddenly wander around the business and you're picking up bits of litter and you're walking down a warehouse aisle and go, I want that tidied up. And, you know, has everyone been health and safety trained and things like that? And they're things you'd never, ever think about when you're a non-executive director in a specific function. So what you've got to do is in my view, in order to be successful in that journey, you've already got to start investigating what it means to be an executive director. Start reading about it. What's the difference between non-executive and executive in terms of the legal statutory duty that you need to start wandering around with? So really begin to understand that. And then once you've got that statutory obligation, I think, in mind, you're at a board. Once you get to that, you're on a board of directors. And then once you've got to that board of directors, you're already in a point of influence. And once you're there, your relationships that you generate amongst that board, in my view, begin to then dictate your propensity about whether you're going to make it to the top or not. Because if you always get to that board and just end up in bust-ups with people and you don't spend time generating positive relationships in the business, then fundamentally, you know, when the point comes, who's going to sponsor you? Who's going to be that person that says, yeah, do you know what, we all like individual A or B. We think they're a good person, and actually there's somebody that I can work with. And then fundamentally, I think, is the point where you can break through to the top. So what I've done is I've developed, just for today, 5 thoughts that I want to share with you that I think if you were to take those 5 thoughts and do something with them, then I believe that I can increase your ability to get your trajectory to get to the top. But first, oh, that hurts. And I do spend a lot of time at a lot of conferences across various different sectors and fields. And do you know what? Sometimes when you go, what do you think about marketing, folks? And you kind of get these sorts of responses. And they really, really hurt, don't they? Marketing don't spend enough time out with our customers. They're too excitable all the time. You know, they come up with a new idea and a rabble goes dashing off when I'm trying to make this sales target here. You know, I need them back here and they're all over there. You go, oh, you know, well, you kind of... they're disconnected from sales. They don't spend any time with the sales force. They deliver all these materials and nobody uses them. You know, oh, that hurts, you know, good intentions, all that sort of stuff. They alienate IT. Go talk to the CIO community about CMOs. No wonder there's a bit of a tussle going on, because they think every time that you go and create another new website, application, you know, something or off of the corporate IT network, they think you are generating a security risk. But you're looking back at them and going, hang on a minute, you don't work fast enough, and you don't talk to us, and you don't understand the pressures we're under. So kind of there's all this stuff going on, right? All this stuff in organizations of people posturing, and, you know, it's you, and you know, it's you, and it's kind of like, oh. So I think we've got to take that on the chin and go, well, okay, well, if people are wandering around with perceptions like this, which of course are distorted, good, what we're going to have to do is correct those distortions. So remember when we talked about being flawsome? So if this is what people are thinking, how do we correct those in order that we can be awesome? So the first thing that I would recommend to you is you've just got to totally get on the numbers. And I don't just mean your numbers, I mean the numbers. The overall numbers for the business. You know, what's the business doing in terms of profit, turnover, year-on-year sales, quarterly quotas? And the way I talk about that is just get OCD about your OCP, all right? Or overall company performance. Be that person that if the CEO bumps into you in the corridor, can talk at this big level about the numbers and performance. And I learned this from this time with the Army guys, right? They talk about something called 2 up, 2 down leadership, which is how you ensure that at all times you have in your brain what's going up 2 up above you and 2 down below you. And so my 2 up in my company is the European CEO and the global CEO. So they're my 2 up at brother. We had a European dinner in Paris. Here's the seating plan, and I get sandwiched between the 2 of them. Global CEO to my left, European CEO to my right. I'm well prepared. I know the global numbers, I know the European numbers. I don't have to know them, but I know them. So I'm OCD about being on the numbers. Before I'd even got to that, I had pre-thought the fact that if I get to meet either the global CEO that night or European CEO and have a conversation, I'm prepped. I already know in my head 4 or 5 things I'm going to roll out as my rehearsed, how are things? And I go, bang, 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 bang. And they go, oh, he's on the numbers, isn't he? It creates an awful lot of confidence in executives in you. So really get OCD about the numbers for the business. The second point is actually get out more. Don't market from behind your desk. Get out to your customers. Get out alongside your sales team. You know, get out there with the most successful person in the sales team, with the sales managers. Get in front of the customers. What are they really talking about? Get in front of the sales teams. And it kind of reminds me a little bit, actually, of a story that when I was in charge of marketing, I had an agency, and we were asking them to solve this problem. And every time they came back with an idea, it just was totally off the mark. So I said, right, I've had enough. I want your creative director and the team who are organizing the thoughts around this project to be available at 2 o'clock on Thursday. I'll come and pick you up. I went and picked them all up, and I drove them to PC World. I stood them in the aisle in PC World and lined them all up and said, tell me why your idea is not working. And they all just had their eureka moment. oh, now we see, we've got this, and it was all in the briefing document, guys, but I had to put them in the place for them to get it. Do you know what I mean? So I think you will create more credibility as an individual if you're seen as somebody that's out a lot, out with the team. The team feel connected. The team feel like you're listening. The materials you generate are relevant. The materials are of impact. My third tip is about networking more internally. So I'm talking about now developing relationships between people you might not normally meet. So if there is a pain point with IT, go and make it your objective to develop a great relationship with the guy in charge or person in charge of IT. Go talk to the CIO, because they've got a problem, that they've got a bit of a problem with you, and a lot of IT people, and it's an overgeneralization, so they're kind of a bit more introverted, a bit more logic-y, a bit more break and fix, whereas perhaps sometimes on the right, marketeers are a little bit more big picture, a bit more potential-based in terms of their thinking. And as a result of it, actual just sort of general thinking patterns sometimes clash. So go and walk in their shoes for a bit, allow them to walk in your shoes for a bit, and you'll be surprised what you can achieve. Also, your sales director, you know, probably your biggest either fan or protagonist in the organization. So make sure that you are picking off people of influence in your own organization and actually prioritizing time with them, because I believe that that will create far more chemistry and far more cultural impact and really grease the skids for your journey through to the board, if that's what you desire. The fourth point is about developing yourself. And I'm a great believer in lifelong learning, that you always should be trying to improve, always trying to raise your bar, always trying to learn new things. And things that I began to look at were finance for finance managers. So I'd go on that course, you know, and I'd be in a room full of people that don't really understand profit and loss accounts and balance sheets and shareholder agreements and things like that. I had absolutely no idea about that when I became a non-exec director in the beginning, but I went and I learned about it all. I learned about the numbers, how the company works, what the drivers are, the things that actually the CEO is going to be really passionate and interested about. What are the leading indicators that they love, in order that I could make sure that the things that we're doing were really aligned to it. I went on lots of leadership courses because I realized that actually I was probably a super manager, you know, a revved up version of what you used to be. So when you become a manager of managers, you just sort of work harder and longer. And actually what you've got to do is bridge yourself over from the harder and longer to delegated, communicative, emotionally intelligent, all that kind of good stuff. So you had to become really an expert in people development. So I went on lots of courses, I worked with psychologists, did everything, you know, in order that I could develop myself and show to the business that I was in a state of readiness as an individual, that I could actually go over that bridge. I wasn't one-dimensional as a person. I was multi-dimensional. I was preparing myself for generalism, albeit I was a specialist. So I was kind of laying my stall out well before the opportunity got put on the plate, actually. And finally, learn. And I think this is a difference from developing, because learning is about when you see something and you do something about it. So when I talked about being flawsome earlier, some of my greatest learnings have come from my toughest feedback. Let me give you one of those. I was with a Japanese person, and I said, you know, I'm really, really keen that when the next opportunity comes up, that I might be the person that would be considered to be the new managing director of the company. And what I heard was, you're far too positive. You're too positive. And I thought, what? You know, are you kidding me? I'm the sales director for the company. I run a sales team of 55 people, a sales budget of £100 million. My job is to be positive. And what they are actually saying to me was actually, what that constant positivity does is makes us feel nervous, that you don't have a plan B. That actually, we give you a target and you go, yay, you know, like custom marching over the top, you know, thousands dying. No, actually, what we want to know is that you can be a guardian of the ship. So we like positivity, that's good, but we always need a plan B and actually what we call in Brother a plan C, a contingency. So plan A is actually what we think is actually going to happen, kind of like our true forecast. Plan B is the budget, which is normally bigger than anything we've ever thought, but plan C is the contingency. And what that allows us to do is have a parameter of performance that looks like this, which means worst ways it will be this, mid ways it will be that, and best ways it will be that. And I learned to talk ABC. So in the company of my senior executives, what I learned from that really tough bit of feedback, and I was sulking for weeks about it, don't get me wrong, is I realized, you know what, I'm being taught perhaps one of my greatest lessons, that I need to start being more positive and realistic in the way that I communicate with executives around me. So those 5 steps, I believe, will dramatically increase your propensity to be able to reach a board of directors in a company and fundamentally become a chief executive. So, but there is one more thing that I just want to leave you with, which is this acronym called TWA. Now, anybody old enough in the room to still remember the airline TWA? Just a few of us. Okay, jolly good. Well, this is a famous airline back in the day. But I use this as an acronym, actually, because the last part of the winning pattern, the most important component in everything that you do, is action. Because lots of people have thoughts and lots of people talk about things, but successful people action those things. And I would highly recommend to you to have a look at some of the things I've talked about today. I've introduced 2 winning patterns to you today of how you could be more successful getting through the door with senior executives or more successful in your career. So all I would ask is pick one of them, either one theme, and then think of an action that you could personally take, that you could take away and do something tomorrow to change. Because it's the people that do this are the people that fly. So there's my zoom out. That's what today's been all about. I want to thank you for listening. You can find me here on Twitter at PhilJones40.